Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments, honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. Your Honor, my attorney said, rising so smoothly his chair barely whispered against the tile. One more witness. The courtroom went as still as a pond at sunrise. The fluorescent lights hummed. A bailiff shifted his weight. The leather of his belt creaked. Across the aisle, my daughter's pen rolled off the yellow legal pad and struck wood with a dry tick. Becca didn't reach for it. She stared at the double doors as if something on the other side might decide the story of her life. Ryan leaned forward, hands folded, as if he'd been taught the gesture in some workshop titled How to Look Responsible. The judge didn't blink, neither did I. In Willow Creek, Ohio, we learn early how to wait out thunder. It did not begin here. A year earlier, my husband Tom died in his sleep. No sound, no warning, just the sudden, indecent quiet that follows a ruptured vessel in the brain. I woke because the porch light had burned all night and I kept meaning to fix the timer. The pale square of it lay across the carpet like a second window, and when I reached for Tom's shoulder to tell him, I met the kind of stillness that has its own temperature. After the ambulance left, the house seemed to widen around me. People came, neighbors, church ladies, mothers of children I'd taught to read in room 12. They carried casseroles with foil tops and said words that rattled in the air and dropped. June Whitaker from 2 doors down brought a pie the color of late September and stayed long enough to wash my mugs and wipe the sink dry twice. It was her way of holding me up without telling me so. By the second weekend, the parade thinned, as parade should. The porch light kept confusing me. I'd walk out to the steps and stand with the remote in my palm, not pressing anything, listening to the crickets declare their ordinary lives. Becca came with a list. She wore black like an anchor woman and kissed my cheek as if nothing soft might break. "Mom," she said, "we're going to make this easy." We meant Becca and her husband Ryan. He shook my hand a beat too long and then glanced around the living room like a contractor appraising square footage. Boxes appeared before I had time to decide. "Just until you're steady," Becca said, slipping the truck keys into her coat pocket. Ryan installed a Ring camera above the driveway and a keypad lock on the back door while explaining to me that crime rates spike after obituaries. He fetched my iPad to simplify the bills and click through screens at a speed I couldn't match even on my best days, teaching fractions. "Auto-pay paperless," he said, smiling in a way that was meant to be serviceable. No more checks to lose. The potluck at church turned into a puddle of sympathy and paper plates. I stood in the entryway and hugged more people than I could name. When I reached for my phone to text June, I couldn't find it. Becca already had it. She was smiling at a woman from choir who'd asked, "How's your mother really?" and answering for me, "She's resting. The doctor says to limit stimulation." There was no doctor. They moved into the guest room with 3 suitcases and a garment bag. By the end of the week, Ryan's weights had taken up the corner of the garage next to Tom's tackle box, and I couldn't find the blue binder where I kept appliance manuals. "I put everything in one place," he said, patting his laptop. I tried to hold on to what mattered. The hydrangeas I watered at dusk, the blue ceramic mug from my former first graders that said "World's Best Teacher" in wobbly paint. But the house began to smell faintly of someone else's coffee. Becca's lotion lingered in the hallway. Ryan liked the TV loud and late, and it turned out the porch light had a setting he preferred called dusk to dawn. When June knocked, Becca met her on the porch with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "We're keeping visitors to a minimum," she said like a nurse who'd learned how a door can be a wall if you stand in the right place. June glanced past her shoulder toward my foyer, where my shoes waited in a neat row, the laces I always double-knotted for the notion of it. "Tell Miriam I brought that book she wanted," June said. The book came back to my doorstep in a plastic bag 3 days later. No note, just the weight of pages. If you'd asked, I would have told you I was grateful. I would have said truthfully that grief fogs the brain, that dinner appearing without my hands, that the noise of someone else moving around the kitchen at 6:30, all of it felt like warmth. But warmth can hide a pilot light that never quite catches. Little things accumulated. A white envelope from Buckeye Credit Union addressed to me, but opened the flap neatly resealed. Inside, a form letter confirming a change to the primary contact. When I showed it to Becca, she made the face she used on customer service calls, the one that said, "Give me a minute and I'll make this right." "Mom, you had it on an old email," she said, tapping her phone. "Ryan fixed it. You're welcome." Fixed became the verb of the season. He fixed the timer on the porch light, which then never turned off. He fixed my landline by forwarding it to Becca's cell so we don't miss calls. He fixed the grocery list by sharing it with an app I didn't own. For my birthday, Becca bought me a lavender sleep spray and a weighted blanket. "It will keep you settled," she said, laying the blanket over my legs as if I were an engine that might rattle apart without pressure. I slept worst on the nights I sprayed the lavender. Somewhere a list kept lengthening. The Ring camera sent pings to a phone that wasn't mine. People at church stopped me in the cereal aisle to nod solemn nods and tell me I looked good considering. I said thank you and meant nothing insincere by it. One Friday, the mail brought a glossy trifold from the bank with photos of retirees arranging orchids on porches very much like mine. "Go paperless today," it chirped. The bottom corner announced a preferred client meeting with a date I didn't recognize and my signature in ink I don't own. I must have signed that I told myself aloud in the kitchen, because sometimes the sound of your own voice keeps a room with you. I set the trifold next to the cobalt bowl where Tom dropped his keys. The bowl looked blue enough to drown in. That evening, as the sky turned the thin color of skim milk, I heard Ryan in the garage on the phone. The door was half down. Air moved through in a tired way. His voice carried like voices do when the speaker believes himself alone. He laughed. "It's fine," he said, and then softer, a string of numbers, the sort you use for passwords or an estimate. "Plenty of equity." He paused. "Just sign and go, man. Families do this all the time." It wasn't proof of anything. It was a sentence you tie to a rock and keep in your pocket to see if it drags you under. After dinner, lasagna in a foil pan because grief makes supermarkets generous. Becca stacked the plates and told me to sit. "You forget where you put the car keys twice this week," she said lightly, rinsing the casserole dish. "I made an appointment with someone to help us organize. It's not a big deal." Her tone carried the sunshine of a vitamin ad. I pictured the keys exactly where I'd left them on a hook, Tom screwed into the mudroom wall the winter we painted the kitchen. But memory isn't a ledger you can wave in someone's face. It's a drawer that sticks when watched. When the house settled at last, and their bedroom TV clicked off, and the fridge made the long swallow it does before sleeping, I stood on a footstool and slid the world's best teacher mug to the back of the highest shelf. My hands knew the place. Dust rhymed the lip. I told myself I was making space for things we all use now, tall glasses, new routines. I told myself many reasonable things. On the way down, my heel tapped the footstool and it knocked softly against the cabinet. The sound was small, but it told the truth about gravity. I wiped the counter with a dishcloth. Outside, the porch light burned the same blank square on the lawn, bright as morning long past the hour it should have yielded to dark. The porch light burned through the night, a square of false morning pasted to the lawn. By breakfast, Becca had a clipboard and a cheerfulness that worked like anesthesia. "I booked someone to help us get organized," she said, setting the clipboard next to my coffee as if it were a placemat. Executive functioning household systems, nothing scary. Ryan slid an omelet onto my plate, the pan clanging a little too loudly against the stove. "Streamline is the word," he said. "Less stress, fewer slips." Slips. I looked down at the fork. I had taught children to keep numbers lined up by place value, to carry carefully and show their work. Slips lived in math, not in the map of a person. At noon, Becca propped an iPad on the dining table and angled the camera toward my face. A woman in a neat sweater appeared in a square, no office behind her, just a blurred wall and a fern. "Hi, Miriam." We'll do a quick cognitive check, just routine. I answered what month it was. I named a president I had voted for twice and a neighbor's dog that barked at bicycles. I copied a clock face with the hands at 11:10. You did well, the woman said, all honey. I'll send along suggestions. See, Becca said after the call. Helpful. She tidied the table and the iPad made a soft chime for a new email I couldn't read. Later, an envelope arrived with a glossy logo I didn't recognize and a paragraph about supporting decision-making. The tone suspected things it hadn't earned the right to suspect. That evening, Ryan brought a leather folio to the dining table. He had placed a pen on top as if setting silverware. Insurance updates, he said. Small stuff. Beneficiaries, emergency contacts. Sign and we can stop getting those nagging letters. The papers came with tabs. Sign here in flags the color of cheerleaders. I signed where the tabs asked me to sign because I had been taught to be courteous to structure. Ryan fed each page to a slim scanner he'd parked at the table's edge. The machine hummed like a mosquito and spit the sheet into a neat stack. When the doorbell rang, I heard June's voice before I saw her. I brought apple bread, she said, bright as Sunday morning. Becca met her on the porch. We just sat down with some paperwork, she said, polite but firm. Mom needs to rest after. A rustle, a quiet exchange. The door closed. The smell of cinnamon stayed behind without the person who had carried it. Small things changed shape. Ryan labeled the pantry as if an inspection were scheduled, grains canned baking. My flour went into a clear bin with a scooped lid. See, he said, making a show of how the lid sealed. I nodded, touched the smooth plastic, and now I knew where a secret could live. A call came the next afternoon from a number I didn't recognize. Miriam Cole, a woman said. This is Lena from Buckeye Credit Union. I'm calling to confirm a cash withdrawal today. I didn't go to the bank, I said, my voice doing that private wobble it saves for strangers. Right, that's why I'm calling, she said softly. A person with authority on your account made a withdrawal for $9,000. It's not wrong, but we like to touch base. 9,000 had a particular ring to it, like a step taken to avoid a creaky board. I began. Mom Becca was suddenly at my shoulder, hand out for the phone. She gets mixed up with numbers, she said into the receiver, gentle as a lullaby. Yes, we're managing things because she's overwhelmed. Thank you for your diligence. She ended the call and handed me the phone. They worry, she said, as if that explained everything. I did not say the number out loud again. I wrote it in small, careful digits on a sticky note and slid the note beneath the cobalt key bowl where it would lie flat and patient. Mail arrived with my name printed in a font that wanted me to trust it. I found a letter about a change of correspondence preference and another one confirming authorized users. The flaps had been opened and resealed with a precision that admired itself. When I asked Becca, said Mom, we went paperless. It's greener. Greener, I repeated, picturing Tom coaxing the hydrangeas back from a late frost with blankets in his breath. Night had its own habits. The garage door groaned at odd hours and settled again. One Tuesday around 11, the half-lowered door made a shadow that cut the concrete in two. Ryan's voice carried not loud, just confident. We're close, he said. Equity's the route. Clean it up with a refi consolidate, then we can breathe. A pause. Conservatorship is the safest way. Judges like structure. The word sat down heavily beside me at the kitchen table. Conservatorship. I tasted the syllables like a pill you're not sure you should take. I wrote it on the back of a grocery list with the end of a pencil so dull it didn't quite make a line. In the morning, Becca put an appointment on the family calendar app and tidied my purse. Simplify, she sang to the tune of an old commercial. You'll feel 10 pounds lighter. I touched the purse when she was done. My checkbook was missing. We'll handle those, she said, not unkindly. June tried again on Thursday with a book about birds, the kind with watercolor plates and the names written in neat type beneath those small living arrows of color. I'll return it, Becca said, keeping a hand on the door. Let me see Miriam's face, June said. "She's napping," Becca replied. "I'll wait on the porch," June said. "I'll drop the book by tomorrow." Becca answered and closed the door with a click too soft to argue with. The bird book arrived in a sack at dusk, and the porch light burned on it as if it were a stage prop. In the quiet that followed, a stubborn part of my brain kept trying to balance the ledger. These were my people. The paperwork was tidy. The omelets were hot. Still, a draft found the seams. I began to keep a log in the back of a recipe binder, dates times what had changed. I wrote it small on the lines meant for ounces and temperatures. If I opened the binder to Tom's chili, it looked like dinner. I also learned the ways a house can whisper back if you ask it to. The Ring camera blinked when anyone crossed the driveway. The light on the base flashed a soft blue. The new keypad register on the back door chirped each time a code was entered. I couldn't read codes, but I could count chirps. 2 short, 1 long, or 3 short. People have rhythms. Machines tell them when they aren't paying attention. On a rain-bright Saturday, a white SUV idled in front of the house, its hazard lights sending patient orange squares onto the wet street. A woman came to the door with a case the size of a hymn book and a smile you could fold and put in your pocket. Ryan ushered her in. "Mobile notary," he said over his shoulder, as if he were telling me we'd ordered pizza. "It's easier for everyone." I stood in the hallway and watched her pen make slow loops. "We'll need the grantee's ID," she said, glancing up. "Mom's is in the dish," Becca said, already reaching. She held my driver's license with 2 fingers like a note she had rehearsed. The notary's stamp made a damp sound against the paper, thunk lift thunk. It sounded official in the way a door sounds official when it closes between 2 people. "Sign here, Miriam," Ryan said, turning a page toward me with a smile that narrated how easy things were. "Tell me again," I said, steadying the pen, "what this one is." "Title insurance," he said. "A warranty deed, just standard protections." Protections. The word can wear 2 uniforms and salute both sides. The pen made my name in 3 places. The notary packed her stamp and left as quietly as she'd come. Outside, the SUV's hazard lights blinked once more like a wink and went dark. That night, unable to sleep, I opened the recipe binder and read my own cramped notes as if they belonged to a person I wanted to meet. I slid a sandwich bag into the flour bin and tucked my old phone inside it, the one I hadn't traded in when the carrier mailed a newer model. The bin closed with an honest click. I stood there with my hands on the counter, feeling the laminate give a little under my palms, and counted my breaths to 10. In the morning, Becca made a show of sorting the mail at the table, 3 piles, yours, mine, household. "We'll keep this simple," she said. My pile had a postcard from a former student and a coupon for toothpaste. Hers had a thick envelope with my name to her address. "Forwarding's a mess," she muttered, slipping it into the household stack without looking up. Before lunch, the phone rang. "Buckeye Credit Union," the voice said. "Is now a good time?" "I'd like to see Lena," I answered, surprising myself with the shape of the request. "In person. A beat." "I can note that," the voice said. "We have you on file as preferring Becca Hart for financial conversations." "I'd like to see Lena," I repeated, because sometimes a sentence earns its right to exist by saying it twice. I hung up and went to the sink, ran the tap until the water turned cold, and drank from my hands. When I turned, June was at the window over the sink, her face framed by hydrangea. She tapped her knuckle lightly against the glass, a sound like a question that already knows the answer. I opened the back door. The keypad chirped. "Walk with me," she said. We went down the steps to the narrow path between our yards. The porch light was still on, though the day was bright. June looked up at it, then back at me. 7:30, she said, handing me a yellow sticky note. "Sunday. Church basement. We do coffee and eggs, nothing formal." I folded the note and put it in the little pocket inside my sweater where I used to keep gold stars for spelling tests. The hydrangeas shifted in a wind that hadn't been announced by any forecast. On my way back inside, I pressed the switch for the porch light. It clicked off. A moment later, somewhere inside the walls, the timer decided what it wanted, and the light clicked on again, polite and relentless as a form letter. The sticky note lived in my sweater pocket until Sunday. 7:30 found me in the church basement with coffee that tasted like the pot remembered last week and a line of folding chairs that bowed at the knees. June steered me past the Widow's Breakfast Club card tables. Sunday, hair casseroles like geography, and into a corner where a man in a dark jacket stood, as if he'd been taught to leave room between himself and anything breakable. Avery Collins, June said. He knows banks. He shook my hand without squeezing. Up close, he had the kind of face that doesn't ask you to trust it, which is how trust starts. I told him what I could without letting my voice trip the envelopes that arrived, opened the tidy flags on documents, the $9,000 phone call, the word that wouldn't leave my mouth, a loan conservatorship. Avery listened the way kids do when you show them a trick with coins, and they're trying not to miss the part where the quarter disappears. All right, he said finally. First principle is distance. You'll sleep somewhere else tonight. I don't want a scene, I said. Then we won't have one, he answered. He pulled a card from his pocket, wrote an address, and turned the card so I could see it. Maple Street, 3rd floor, a sublet he used for files when clients needed quiet. Deputy Reed will drive you. You'll take only what you'd be sad to lose. What about my house? It will still be standing tomorrow, he said, and we'll make it stand in court with the right paper. June's palm found my elbow, a small practical blessing. I'll put a pot roast in your refrigerator, she said, so it smells like you when you come back. After breakfast, Avery walked me through a list that felt like a prayer if you said it with care. Identification, medications, one change of clothes, comfortable shoes, photographs if they fit, anything with original ink marriage certificate, the old deed. I nodded and flattened the list in my purse to stop it from shaking. We picked a window Monday afternoon, Becca to yoga Ryan to a showing on Pine Lane. June would watch from her porch. Avery texted a number and got a reply that said simply on it, Deputy Reed. At home, I made my movement small. I watered the hydrangeas, let the hose loop and hiss across the grass, and laid towels flat in the dryer, the way Tom liked them so they'd fold square. I stood a long time in front of the high shelf, where the world's best teacher mug waited like a witness who would not be called yet. I touched the handle and left it there. When Monday came, the house performed its rituals. Becca's gym bag thumped down the stairs at 3:10. Ryan's cologne passed through the hallway at 3:22. At 3:36, the garage door groaned. At 3:38, silence. I lifted the tote from the closet, papers sandwiched inside a manila folder, the photo of Tom in his fishing hat, a sweater, a small tin of sewing needles I didn't intend to use but couldn't leave. I locked the front door behind me and walked to the corner as if I were going to the library. A cruiser idled by the stop sign, no lights. The deputy at the wheel had the kind of posture that forgives nervous passengers. Ms. Cole, he said through the open window. Miriam, I said. Reed, he said, touching the brim of his cap like men do in old movies when they remember being taught. Seatbelt, please. Maple Street climbed a little from the river and then opened its palms to a row of narrow buildings that had learned to hold their breath. The apartment was one room with a couch that had been bought for its willingness, a table with 2 chairs, and a window that knew the habits of morning. The air smelled faintly of bleach and old boxes. The lock clicked with the particular certainty of new metal catching true. Avery arrived 20 minutes later with a legal pad and grocery bags that didn't announce themselves as kindness coffee eggs, bread soap, a pack of dishcloths with blue stripes. He set them on the counter, then stood, hands in his pockets, not asking how I felt. We'll do 2 tracks, he said, pen ready. Health and money. Health first. He had already scheduled a cognitive evaluation for Tuesday morning with Dr. Wren, an older man with a waiting room full of outdated magazines and a clock that ticked audibly enough to make a point. They'll tell us what we already know, Avery said, but in words that wear lab coats. Tuesday, I drew a clock face, and named 3 words and remembered them 10 minutes later and matched shapes that wanted badly not to be matched. Dr. Wren asked if I ever got lost in my own street. I said only when winter dressed the trees alike. He smiled once the way a teacher does when you show your work neatly. "You are not in cognitive decline, Ms. Cole," he said at the end, printing his name beneath a letter that said so. Money came next. The bank sat on a corner that had contained a bank as long as anyone remembered money or corners. Lena met us in a small glass room with a plant that made oxygen like it owed you something. She shook my hand and looked at my face the way you memorize a route in a town with one-way streets. "I'm sorry for calling your house," she told me. "It's policy to confirm out-of-pattern withdrawals." "I appreciate the call," I said, not because I was being brave, but because the word stood up well and wanted a job. She slid a folder across the table. "We noticed 3 cash withdrawals at $9,000 each, spaced 11 days apart," she said, tapping the columns. "Also new authorized users added in the last 6 weeks, and a change to paperless statements." She glanced at Becca's name where it nested under mine. "I'll file a suspicious activity report. It isn't a criminal charge, it's a way to make the record breathe." The printouts looked like music I couldn't play but could feel in my bones. A couple of transfers went somewhere that had a name too neatly chosen: Sycamore Equity Holdings, LLC. "I can't see inside that," Lena said, "but it smells like a shelf company." Back at Maple Street, Avery brought a man named Bryce who called himself a forensic accountant and had the haircut of someone who kept receipts for haircuts. He opened a laptop and colored the columns with a finger the way a magician squares a deck before he shows you which card was always yours. "Merchant codes," he said. "Airbnb for business meetings in Parma. A designer's retainer to refresh a short-term rental. Cashier's checks payable to a title company across the county line." "How do you know the Airbnb?" I asked. "The descriptor," he said, tapping "ABNB stay or they forget the world tells on itself." Avery did the walking. He visited the title company with a subpoena that carried the court's polite threat and returned with copies of documents that had my name wearing someone else's certainty. He stopped by the office building where a mobile notary kept a mailbox and left with a printout of fob logs from a man named Caleb who ran the security desk and could read a building like a book. "After hours entry," Avery said, laying the sheet on the Maple Street table. "Same evening the mobile notary visited your house. Ryan's name on the registry, he signed the vendor log. God bless laziness." That night, Maple Street sounded different than Sycamore had. The refrigerator clicked on and off like a metronome used to better timing, and the pipes made a small argument against the walls. My phone lit the room with square light. Missed calls. Texts that began with mom and ended in paragraphs that wanted an audience. I put the phone face down and watched the dark turn a shade truer. Wednesday morning, the door buzzer sounded once. When I opened, Noelle stood on the landing with her hair in a braid that meant she had done the work herself. 18 sits oddly on a person. It leans slightly forward, ready to run. "I can only stay a minute," she said, slipping inside. She had a canvas tote that said robotics in block letters and something heavier than notebooks in the bottom. "Mom thinks I have tutoring." "Do you?" I asked. "I have you," she said. At the table, she unpacked the tote in quick, practiced motions, a sandwich bag with a micro SD card, a notebook, a charger, a phone I didn't recognize. "This is my other phone," she said. "I bought it with babysitting money and kept it off at home. It doesn't know our Wi-Fi." She labeled items with small pen strokes, as if she'd learned from a lifetime of teachers that labels keep panic from losing things. "Ring clips of the driveway and front door from the last 4 months," she said, touching the card. "Metadata is intact. You can see timestamps and who's walking in. Ryan brought a notary after 10 p.m. twice. There's a video of him carrying a folio to the car. The notebook held printouts of text messages Ryan to someone saved as K mortgage refee will clear the crypto mess. Need her SIGs. Becca to Ryan. Doctor will say what we need. It's a template." "Where did you get these?" I asked, my throat learning a new kind of tight. Screenshots from Mom's iPad when she left it open. Noelle said not proud of the skill, just stating the way the world had presented itself. I emailed them to the other phone. I didn't change anything. Time date sender, it's all there. She reached into her tote and brought out a small black square. Also the base station for the ring. I took it for a day and pulled the logs before I put it back. She shut her eyes briefly, a private flinch. I wore Dad's hoodie. They didn't notice. I wanted to tell her a dozen things. I said thank you and set my hand over hers. Her fingers were cold and sure. Avery came that afternoon with a bag of cables and the careful ceremonial air of a person entering a sanctuary. He copied, verified, sealed. He printed a chain of custody form and had me sign the edge so the signature crossed the tape the way you close a letter when you don't want a stranger to read it. We'll authenticate the metadata, he said, half to me, half to the room. He filed papers at the courthouse I had spent my career driving past without reading the names on its steps. An ex parte motion for a temporary restraining order. A request to freeze transfers on the property at a 42 Sycamore. A petition to enjoin authorized users pending a hearing. Words stacked themselves obediently beneath a blue stamp, and then walked down a hall behind a clerk with a ponytail and a cardigan the color of wet slate. Lena called to say she had filed the SAR. I can't tell you more, she said, gently apologizing for the structure she lived in. But if someone asks me questions later, I'll answer the truth. Caleb, the security desk man with the fob logs, faxed a letter on letterhead that still smelled faintly of warm paper. I reviewed access records. It read, find entries logged after 10:30 p.m. for a vendor named R. Hart on 2 dates. He had attached stills from a hall camera, a man in a ball cap, a portfolio that looked heavy by choice. By Friday, the stack on the Maple Street table had become its own kind of architecture. Dr. Wren's letter, Lena's summaries, Bryce's spreadsheets, Caleb's logs, printouts of text messages, a list of outgoing calls from my landline that hadn't been dialed by me. Avery laid a paperweight on it that looked like a river stone and said, that will do. He meant for now. He did not have to say more. When the order came through, stamped, signed, dipped in the ink of authority, Avery slid it across the table without flourish. Temporary restraining order granted, he said. No transactions on the real property, no changes to accounts, no removal of fixtures. The words were plain and exactly what they meant. I read the page twice the way you read a recipe you've cooked all your life but never written down. The letters arranged themselves into a shape I recognized. Outside Maple Street went about its afternoon the garbage truck sighing at the curb, a neighbor whistling off-key the river pretending it didn't carry anything anyone had thrown into it. I washed a coffee mug and set it on the drain board. The apartment looked both borrowed and earned. I took the list from my purse and turned it over to its clean side. There was room for new handwriting. I dated the top right corner because old habits stand between you and the wind, and sometimes that is enough. The order lived in my bag like a small square of iron. On Monday, Avery and I walked up the courthouse steps with the kind of measured pace that keeps a heartbeat where you can use it. The building's limestone glowed with a colder light than the sky. Inside, the air held the smell of coffee that had overboiled in a break room and the soft fatigue of paper that had been handled too many times. Room 301 was taller than it was wide, with windows that pretended not to notice the town. The benches had been polished by decades of worry. A clock near the flags kept time with a purpose. The bailiff spoke in the tone of a man who says the same words every day and believes in saying them well. All rise. Judge Eleanor Pike took the bench without dramatics. She had the kind of face that could listen to a storm and ask it to repeat itself more clearly. Rudyard Lane, the Hart's attorney, wore a suit you notice only once. Becca sat beside him in a gray dress and pearls that caught the light. Ryan had his jaw set for endurance. Avery stood. Your Honor. He said, "We represent Miriam Cole in a petition to void improper transfers and enjoin further dissipation of assets." He didn't turn the sentence into a performance. He set the stack of exhibits on the table with a hand that had learned not to show its tremor. Rudyard rose as if pulled by a string. "Your Honor, we are here because a daughter and son-in-law stepped in when an aging parent was vulnerable. Any transfers were voluntary executed to protect a home and consolidate complicated finances. We intend to show concerned caretaking, not exploitation." Judge Pike looked at him for exactly the length of a breath. "We'll see it," she said, and the clerk began to swear us into a process that treated language like law and silence like a witness. Avery started where a map starts with a legend. He admitted Dr. Wren's letter, the bank summaries, Bryce's spreadsheets, the fob logs from the office building, the ring clips printouts of text messages, and a transcript of a landline's outgoing calls. The clerk marked and numbered each exhibit with a practiced ritual that gave paper a spine. "First witness," Avery said, "Dr. Wren." The doctor stepped up with his briefcase like a school principal carrying a short day's worth of trouble. He explained the test battery in words that wanted to be understood: clock drawing, word recall, trail making, digit span. He talked about false positives, fatigue, grief's fog that passes like weather, and the kind that does not. "Ms. Cole is not in cognitive decline," he said into the microphone, and the sentence sat on the wood and made itself heavy. Rudyard approached with the kind of smile that wears its apology like cologne. "Doctor, cognitive tests are snapshots, aren't they?" "They are observations," Dr. Wren said. "And you can't tell us with absolute certainty how Ms. Cole functions at home when stressed dealing with bills or under the influence of medication. I can tell you how she performed under standardized conditions and that her performance is inconsistent with dementia." Rudyard let the syllable work as if it had earned a paycheck. "So, no dementia. But confusion? Forgetfulness? Age? Appropriate decline?" "Humans forget," the doctor said. "We remain human in court." Lena from Buckeye Credit Union followed. She looked small behind the witness table, but made the numbers stand up. She explained cash structuring in the clear cadence of someone who has trained new tellers, why 9,000 is not 10. The pattern's compliance flags the reason for a suspicious activity report. "It's not an accusation," she said. "It's light." Rudyard tried a shrug he may have practiced in a mirror. "You file many of these, don't you, Ms. Ortiz? And most are nothing. Many of them make other people do their jobs." Lena replied not unkindly. "Bryce demonstrated the path money takes when it has been told to wear a hat and dark glasses. He traced the ABNB descriptors, the designer's retainer, the cashier's checks to a title company across the county line, the deposits into Sycamore Equity Holdings, LLC. He projected a chart. It wasn't art, but it had the truth's particular geometry." "Isn't it possible," Rudyard asked, "that these are legitimate business expenses tied to a family plan to generate income by renting out a portion of a home?" "Possible," Bryce said. "It's also possible for a refrigerator to drive a car. You'd want to see the license." The first ring clip played with sound in a room that had learned to handle more important noise. After 10 p.m., Ryan escorted a woman with a small case up our walk. The porch light drilled a square into the scene. The mobile notary stamp thunked off camera. Timestamps lay in the lower left corner like a dog that knows where to sit. In the second clip, Becca stood at the threshold holding my driver's license in 2 fingers. Rudyard lifted his hands as if to bless the footage. "Your Honor, consents can be given late. Working families manage their time." Judge Pike did not answer him. She looked at the screen as if it had made a point and then returned her attention to the table where the paper sat. Avery called Caleb Monroe the building manager who kept the fob logs, the way a beekeeper keeps bees interested without sentimentality. Caleb authenticated the after-hours entry and produced stills of a man in a ball cap carrying a portfolio to a door marked Title Co. He had a pencil tucked behind his ear and the aura of someone who had never lost a receipt. "And you can identify Mr. Hart," Rudyard said, gesturing toward Ryan. I can identify his signature on my vendor log, Caleb answered, sliding a page forward. Noelle sat behind me with June hands folded, braid tugged over her left shoulder. When Avery called her, she did not stumble on her way to the stand. The clerk swore her in. The oath sat on her shoulders like a jacket that fit. State your name, Avery said. Noelle Hart. And your relationship to the parties. Daughter to Becca and Ryan Hart, granddaughter to Miriam Cole. How old are you? 18. Avery let the room hear the number without decoration. Noelle, he said, did you observe any changes in your grandmother's home in the year after Tom Cole passed? She stopped answering the door because the door never reached her. Noelle said, voice steady. Mom met neighbors outside. The landline went to Mom's phone. Bills were moved to autopay. Labels appeared on everything. There were late-night visitors who carried cases. What did you do about what you observed? I kept records, she said. I downloaded ring clips. I took screenshots of texts when the iPad was left open. I saved metadata. How did you save it? I used a second phone not connected to our Wi-Fi. I emailed files to an account in my name. I didn't edit anything. Avery introduced the micro SD card and the printed screenshots, the chain of custody log, with my signature crossing tape. The clerk marked them. Noelle Avery continued, why did you keep these records? Noelle considered the wood grain on the witness stand as if it could help her be precise. Because when I looked for my grandmother in her own house, I found a system, she said. A system doesn't need you, a house does. Rudyard approached with that softened tone practiced for PTA meetings. Noelle, you love your grandmother very much. Yes, you and your parents have disagreed. Curfews, phones, the usual. We disagreed about lying, she said quietly. Isn't it true that your grandmother is generous with you? Gifts. Money, attention. She's generous with everyone, Noelle said. It's her job as a person. Did she promise you anything in exchange for testifying? A car, a room of your own. She offered me eggs, Noelle said. I said no thank you. I had breakfast. A few people in the gallery made the noise that happens when a small object is dropped from a small height. Rudyard let his smile step back a pace. You took items from your parents' devices. I copied information left open, she answered. They are adults. They close doors when they want privacy. When Avery called the unexpected witness, I felt the room lean in and then correct itself. A woman in a navy blazer took the stand. State your name. Denise Kirsch. And your occupation. I'm a commissioned notary public for the state of Ohio. Do you recognize either of the defendants? Denise looked at Becca, then at Ryan. Mr. Hart, she said. He came to my office 2 months ago with a warranty deed. He wanted it notarized. Did you notarize it? No. The signature looked inconsistent with the sample provided. He asked if I could come after hours to a residence. I told him I don't do off-the-clock calls. Did anything happen to your seal? 2 weeks later, she said, voice thinner. I received a notice from a title company about a deed recorded with my notary information. I had not notarized it. My seal was cloned. I reported it. Avery placed a copy of the title company's courtesy notice on the rail. Denise authenticated it with a stiff nod. I'm not proud to be here, she said, and the room honored the sentence with a decent silence. Rudyard tried to tuck the witness back into a pocket. Ms. Kirsch, notary fraud happens. It's rarely personal. There are gray areas, signature by mark, video, notarizations. I don't do gray, she said. My stamp is either on the paper or it isn't. Avery called me last. The walk to the stand felt shorter than I expected. The microphone was positioned a little too low. The bailiff adjusted it with a care that didn't draw eyes. Miriam Avery said, using my name without title, did you intend to deed your home at 142 Sycamore to your daughter and son-in-law? No. Did you authorize cash withdrawals of $9,000 on 3 occasions last month? No. Did you grant power to add authorized users to your accounts without your express consent? No. Did you agree to a plan to refinance your home in order to consolidate debts unrelated to your expenses? No. Thank you, he said and stepped back. Rudyard came forward. Ms. Cole, you suffered a profound loss when your husband passed. Grief can blur edges. Do you recall signing any documents your son-in-law presented? I recall signing things I was told were insurance and household protections, I said. I recall asking and being told, did you read everything before signing? I read what I could. So you trusted your family. I believe them. Is it possible you consented to changes at the time that you now regret? It's possible I said to regret trusting the wrong person. Consent and information are neighbors. They share a fence. He paused perhaps to hear whether the fence would hold, then nodded and returned to his table. Avery made no speech. He collected the exhibits that had been numbered into existence and stood very still. Your Honor, he said, we asked the court to honor the record. Judge Pike adjusted her glasses. She did not make us wait for a different day. I have read the affidavits and heard the testimony, she said, her voice even its own weather. The bank's compliance officer described structuring consistent with evasion of reporting thresholds. The forensic accountant traced funds to a shell entity and to expenditures unconnected to Ms. Cole's welfare. The building manager authenticated after-hours entries linked to document execution. The notary testified credibly that her commission was misused. The video depicts late-night notarizations at the petitioner's residence. The cognitive assessment is consistent with intact decision-making. She looked at Becca and Ryan in turn. You describe caretaking. The evidence describes control. She signed a page on her bench and handed it to the clerk, who stamped it with the swift, flat authority of ink on paper. The court orders as follows, the judge said. All transfers of real property recorded in the last 12 months purporting to convey 142 Sycamore are void. Title is quieted in the name of Miriam Cole. The defendants are enjoined from entering the premises except to remove personal effects under supervision within 72 hours. No further transactions on petitioner's accounts absent her signature. The court issues a temporary protective order restricting contact pending review. She set her pen down. The record related to possible criminal violations will be forwarded to the prosecutor's office. The bailiff's shoes moved softly on the floor. The clock kept its ordinary pace. Rudyard bent toward his client, speaking low. Becca's shoulders rose and fell as if she'd remembered to breathe and then decided against it. Ryan stared at the tabletop as if it might open. Avery placed the stamped order in a manila folder as if paper could feel safer when covered. He turned to me with a small nod that barely moved his chin. June reached for my hand where it rested on the bench rail. Noelle looked at me with eyes that held nothing theatrical, only the steady intellect of someone who has done the next right thing and found that it still fits. We stood. The door to the corridor swung on a hinge that knew better than to squeak. In the hallway, the light was kinder. People who were not us went on with their days. I folded the copy of the order and slid it into the inside pocket of my coat, the one designed for maps and programs. It lay flat against the fabric and warmed slowly to the temperature of my body as we walked back toward the stairs. We walked out of the courthouse into a sky that had the color of clean dishes. Avery folded the order once, then again, and slid it into my coat. The paper warmed against me as if it understood the point of bodies. 72 hours passed with the precision of a timer. Deputy Reed stood in my doorway while Becca and Ryan packed their clothes into suitcases that zipped loud in the quiet. The mobile notary's thunk lived somewhere in the walls, but it didn't speak. Reed kept his hands at his belt and looked at the baseboards as if checking whether paint had dried. June sat on my porch steps with a Tupperware of potato salad, saying nothing to anyone. Noelle helped carry a box of shoes to the driveway and then came back inside to wash her hands to the wrists. Ryan tried once to take the cobalt bowl. Reed coughed and tapped the order with a knuckle. Ryan set the bowl down. Becca found the bird book and left it on the hall table. When they were done, the house exhaled without sound. The screen door closed on its spring. June stood and nodded at the deputy. He nodded back. She pressed a key into my palm, one from before, brass rubbed smooth by decades of pockets. I found it in the drawer with the rubber bands, she said. The metal felt like a vowel you can always pronounce. Inside, I switched off the porch light with my thumb. It obeyed and stayed off. The square of false morning on the lawn disappeared. Afternoon took its old shape. I opened windows. The house took a breath that belonged to no one but itself. I set the world's best teacher mug on the lowest shelf and turned it so the shaky letters faced the room. The handle remembered my hand. We cooked that night as if the stove had been waiting. Noelle chopped onions while I rubbed a chicken with salt and pepper, the way Tom used to, one palm high, the other palm low. June set the table and told the hydrangeas they'd done good work. We ate at the kitchen table. No TV, no apps, no labels, only plates and a clock that ticked the way clocks used to. My mouth remembered flavor like a person you haven't seen in years, who still knows your birthday. Later, Avery came by with a manila envelope in the careful way he used for doorways. He left the envelope on the counter. From the prosecutor's office, he said. And this from Buckeye. He didn't open them. We didn't either. He tightened the loose screw on the back of a chair as if that were why he had driven over. When he stepped onto the porch, the evening did that wide Ohio thing it does, where the air seems to lift the length of your street. The next morning, I walked to the end of the drive and pulled up the small plastic flag on the mailbox. Metal lifted, metal lowered. I set the trash can at the curb on the right day without counting. Back inside, I found the porch light's timer, a square dial with teeth like a smile, and turned the pins until on meant dusk and off meant the hour after Noelle would likely be asleep. The click was simple and final. The switch knew where it lived. Rooms have a way of telling you what they were trying to be. The study wanted quiet and a pencil cup. The garage wanted Tom's tackle box on the third shelf and nothing arguable beside it. The bedroom wanted the bed against the north wall where morning slips around you and doesn't stare. We moved things until the rooms nodded. Noelle carried her robotics trophies up to the attic room and lined them on the sill, little metal figures raising tiny arms. She hung a string of photographs by the window, a lake in winter, the church basement with a coffee pot fuming a close-up of a hydrangea petal showing its veins like a map of a small town. She slept with her braid loose and the door a hand's width open. I listened to her breathing reach its sure rhythm and let mine find it. The smell in the house changed. It was coffee in the morning, detergent at noon, roast chicken like a memory that keeps its promise. I swept the entry and found a single pearl under the console table. I set it in a dish by the stove and wiped the space it had kept. The floor felt level underfoot. Mail brought things that belonged, a postcard from a former student with a picture of the ocean printed too blue, a flyer for a church rummage sale, a thin letter from the bank with a sentence about restitution written in a font that didn't apologize. I stacked the letters in a drawer that no longer surprised me when I opened it. On Sunday, June knocked with a pie that tasted like July. We drove to the church basement and brought egg salad that needed more pepper. People asked me if I was sleeping. I said yes. It was the kind of yes that proved itself later in the afternoon on the couch, with a book open to a page I didn't finish. That night, I took the key June had given me and put it on its hook in the mudroom, the hook Tom had screwed into the wall 20 years ago, when we started losing little things and wanted a place to find them. The key hung just so. I flipped the porch switch off out of habit and smiled when the light stayed on until it decided otherwise. At 10, the timer clicked and the square of light on the lawn went out. The house kept its shape in the dark. The dark did its work. I washed the mug and left it on the rack to dry. The hydrangeas at the window held their blue without trying. Somewhere down the block, a screen door closed on its spring and a child called goodnight to no one in particular. The room settled. The refrigerator made the short throat clearing it always makes before sleeping. I stood in the kitchen and let the quiet stand with me until it was complete. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.